welcome to Historic Eats, where I recreate recipes from the past and share some of the history behind the dish. Now on this cold winter day, I will be making for you body and soul warming Polish pierogi. Pierogi have been around for centuries, as early as the 1200s, and they've evolved through time to include all different kinds of fillings. But one thing is for certain, they have remained a staple in the Polish cuisine. Later in this episode, there'll be a short segment that shares the backstory of pierogi in Poland, so stay tuned. I love making authentic recipes and sharing some of the history of how they came to be. So click subscribe because that's what makes this channel unique. So this recipe is truly just like the recipe from the past. Pierogi is actually made with just only a few very simple ingredients. They just take a little bit of time to make, but I promise you it is so worth it. And in addition to the pierogi, I'll also be making some Polish kielbasa and sauerkraut to serve alongside of it, so you'll have a complete meal. So without further ado, let's get started. To begin, I've just been peeling my potatoes. I have 1.5 pounds of russet potatoes, and that's about 6 or 8 medium large potatoes. And I just need to peel them right now, and then I'll cut them into cubes. So now I'm just cutting them up, and I'm adding them to this pan of cold water that I've salted. And then I'll take them over to the stove and bring them to a boil and cook them until they're tender. So I removed my potatoes and drained them. They cooked for just over 10 minutes, and as you can see, they're just fork tender. They're not mushy. You want them really the same consistency as they would be for mashed potatoes. To that, I will add 1/2 teaspoon of salt and 2 tablespoons of butter. And I'll start with about 1/4 cup of milk, and I'll just begin mixing it with the electric mixer. Okay, I just finished mixing those. I did add another 1/4 cup of milk, so there was a total of 1/2 cup of milk. And now I have 8 ounces of cheddar cheese. This is both the light and yellow cheddar cheese. And this is a lot of cheese. You can really just do it to your taste. So now the potato filling is ready, and I can set that aside. For the dough, I'm going to go ahead and begin combining my ingredients. I have 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. To that, I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of salt. In a separate bowl for my wet ingredients, I have 1 cup of sour cream, to that, I'll add 1 whole egg plus 1 egg yolk. One tablespoon of melted butter, and 1 tablespoon of oil. The wet ingredients I'll combine with a mixer. You just want to beat it till combined. You don't need to whip it up. And then I'll slowly begin adding my dry ingredients. And I'm just finishing it up with the mixer to make sure it's well combined. So now I'm just bringing the dough together in a ball by hand, and I have it on a lightly floured surface. And I'm just going to knead it a few times just to get it well blended. If your dough feels dry, you can add a tablespoon or two of water. So I only kneaded it for about 2 minutes and it feels like a nice soft consistency. And at this point, you just divide it in half and set it on your counter to rest for 10 minutes. And I'm just going to cover it with plastic wrap to keep it moist. So the dough has rested 10 minutes and I'm going to go ahead and start rolling out the first part. So I've just lightly floured my surface. Okay, I got that all rolled out. It's pretty thin. I measured it. It's about 15 inches by 18 inches. And I'm just going to use my pierogi cutter and cut out my rounds. And this is a 3-inch cutter. And if you don't have a 3-inch cutter, you can definitely use like the top of a drinking glass. Should work fine. So with my filling now, I'm going to put just under a tablespoon on the side of each of the rounds. Seal them, I just put them right in the pierogi press. Make sure the edges are over the crimp ends. And with some water, just dab the edges.
And alternately, if you don't have a pierogi press, it's really very similar. You just put the potato down on one side, just like you did before, and with some water, just dab around the edges and fold it over and line it up, and then just press those edges together, and then take your 2 fingers and really press the seal together all the way around. And then you go back and make like little pleats. It's like where you fold the dough over itself a little bit, about every 1/2 inch, and you do that the rest of the way around. And that's it. Very simple.
So over here at the stove, I have a stock pot half full with boiling water that I've salted, and I can just begin dropping the pierogis in. And you can fit about a dozen pierogis in at a time. And then you just set your timer for 10 minutes. They just cook uncovered for 10 minutes.
Okay, I'm just removing these with a slotted spoon and putting them over here on a cooling rack to drain. Traditionally, pierogies were just served with butter and salt and pepper, so these are actually ready to be plated and enjoyed. But it was also very common to pan saute pierogies as well, so I'm going to demonstrate how to do that and just saute them with butter and onions and some of the drippings from the kielbasa that I'll be cooking here shortly. And by the way, this recipe yielded about 50 pierogies.
Okay, now to begin the sauerkraut, I just cut up about 4 pieces of bacon. You just use to your preference. And I'm just going to fry them until they're golden and crispy. And then I'll remove them and drain them. In the meantime, I'm going to also drain the sauerkraut. Okay, and over here in the colander, I have 1 bag of sauerkraut that I'm just allowing to drain. I did put a catch basin under it. That way, if I need to add more flavoring or salt, I can ladle some of the juices back into it. So we just want to let this drain for a few minutes while the bacon finishes up. So the bacon is done. I put on a paper towel to drain. And I also removed most of the bacon grease from the pan. I left maybe a teaspoon or so in there. And on medium heat, I'm going to just saute 1 medium onion chopped up. And I'm only going to saute this for about 3 minutes. I don't really want it to brown. I just want it to get tender and translucent. Now that the onion is tender, I'm going to add about a half of an apple. This is just a Honeycrisp apple. This is totally optional. Just adds a little sweet tartness. And I'll let that cook just a couple minutes more. Next, I'll pour in the drained sauerkraut. I'm adding 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. Actually, I'll make that 3. And then I'm going to put in 2 bay leaves and about a half a cup of water. I am going to remove the bay leaves, so you don't want to smash them up. Be careful to keep them intact. And I'll also put my bacon back into the mix at this time too. And this is just going to cook down on medium for about 10 to 15 minutes. And at that point, we'll taste it, see if it needs any additional salt or pepper. So it's been 10 minutes and most of the liquid has cooked away. It looks just perfect. I tasted it. It tastes great. It didn't need any salt. I'm just going to put some cracked black pepper on there. And I'm going to remove the bay leaves. And just move it over to another burner to just keep it warm while I start on the kielbasa. Pierogi can commonly be served both sauteed or just boiled and then with butter melted over top. So some of them I'm going to saute and some I'm going to leave as they are and just add the butter. So I have about 2 tablespoons of butter in my skillet here, and I'm going to add to that about a half of an onion, and that's just to get it going a little bit translucent. And then once the pan is up to heat, I'll add my pierogies to it. Looks perfect, so in go the pierogies. Just lay them right in the oil. And I'm keeping my temperature between medium and medium high. It's been just a couple minutes. I'm starting to turn these over. As you can see, they're just perfectly golden. And we want them to be that color on the other side too. So just give them a couple more minutes and they'll be ready to go. So I removed the pierogies that I sauteed. I just left the onions in the pan. I'm going to add some more onions. And I'm also going to add a half of a bell pepper. And just get these going, and I'll add the kielbasa to that. And this is 1 pound of kielbasa that I have sliced. Just gonna throw that in there. Just adding a couple tablespoons of water, and I'm gonna cover it and just let it cook for about 5 to 8 minutes, and I'll take it off and brown it, and it's done. So they're all heated through. I removed the lid. I'm just gonna let them continue to fry for a few more minutes to get the remainder of the water out and just get some browning on the edges of the sausage, and it's completely done and ready to plate up.
In America, you'll find the largest concentration of Polish Americans in mid-Atlantic states such as New York and Pennsylvania. In the upper Midwest, states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Illinois boast strong Polish heritage, especially in cities like Chicago, Detroit, and Milwaukee. When arriving in America, most Polish immigrants settled in these industrial cities for employment. The largest wave of Polish immigrants that came to America was around 1900. At that time, they were the third largest group entering the U.S. behind the Italians and Jews. Those with Polish heritage are known for being hardworking, generously hospitable, and also the originators of today's much-loved historic eat, the Polish pierogi. The origin of pierogi was most likely Eastern Europe. One theory exists that the expeditions of Marco Polo brought dumplings from China to Eastern Europe in the late 1200s. Asian dumplings were dough pockets filled with vegetables, meat, or legumes, and pierogi were likely an adaptation of these. The other popular origin story is that pierogi were brought to Poland from Ukraine. Saint Hyacinth was on a missionary journey to Poland. When he reached Koselleck, the land was in a famine. A great storm then arose and destroyed whatever crops they did have. Saint Hyacinth prayed with the villagers for divine intervention, and the next morning the crops came to life again. As a show of gratitude, the villagers made the first pierogi from the crops and celebrated. Saint Hyacinth is known as the patron saint of pierogi. Early on, other Eastern European countries neighboring Poland, like Russia, Lithuania, Slovakia, and Ukraine, filled pierogi with veal fat, kidneys, greens, and nutmeg. Once potatoes were introduced to Europe in the mid-1600s, they became a common filling. By this time, pierogi were considered a staple food, specifically in Poland. Boiling the pierogi was the most common method of preparation in Poland, followed by simply sautéing them in butter and onion. Although a peasant food, pierogi were popular and were enjoyed by all social classes. Pierogi was also known to be famously served on Christmas Eve in Poland, as Polish Catholics celebrate the vigil and share a feast of 12 meatless dishes. Today, Poland's most popular pierogi fillings include pork, potato, onion, sauerkraut, cheese, and mushrooms. And this Polish bite hasn't been altered much from its authentic style, showing that you just can't improve on perfection. Now on to enjoy the historic Polish pierogi.
Well, everything is all done. I plated it up. Let's give it a try. It's like a flavor explosion on your taste buds. You have that salty sausage with the sweet and sour sauerkraut, and the pierogi is just so creamy and rich. It's just buttery and delicious. It is true comfort food. It just warms you up from the inside out. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks again so much for watching. Don't forget, click subscribe. I have so many more recipes with great history that I'd love to share with you. So until next time, bye-bye.